Story 1. For 42 years, Edgar Barlow tended the town cemetery. Quiet, polite, alone. Locals said he had a gift. Every burial was perfect, every grave pristine. But when a tree uprooted part of the cemetery after a violent storm, rescue workers discovered a hidden concrete hatch just beneath a headstone dated 1978, with locks installed from inside. Inside the sealed room, they found dozens of journal entries, pages of coordinates, and Polaroids of people never officially buried in the cemetery, some of whom were still reported missing. The caretaker is now dead, but his ledgers remain, and they tell a story of graves that were dug for people who never had funerals. June 6, 2023, Mason Hollow, Virginia. Population, 2,404. The summer storm came fast and violent, hurling 70 miles per hour winds across the rolling hills of Mason Hollow. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Power lines fell, and at the town's northern edge, just beyond the wrought iron fence of Whispering Pine Cemetery, a century-old oak twisted free from the soaked earth and crashed through 4 burial plots in Section D. By morning, it wasn't the damage to headstones that made the town panic. It was what lay beneath them. The roots had ripped through a cement layer hidden beneath one of the older graves. At first, workers thought it was just a protective burial vault. Then they saw the padlock and the hinges. The slab wasn't a vault. It was a door. The cemetery no one questioned. Whispering Pines was the kind of cemetery people forgot about. Quiet, humble, a few hundred graves, most weathered and moss-covered. No fancy crypts, no mausoleums, just rows of modest stones and the occasional ceramic angel guarding the departed. At its center stood a small brick caretaker's building, home to an old man no one really knew, Edgar Barlow. He was in his 70s, hunched but strong, with deep-set eyes that never quite met yours. He didn't talk much, didn't go to town events, but everyone knew him. Everyone trusted him. He'd been there since 1981. No one could remember who hired him, or if he'd ever actually been paid. Just Edgar. Local funeral director Molly Raines told reporters the day after the storm. Edgar was always just there. If you needed a plot opened, it was done before sunrise. Every time. Clean lines. Dry coffins. Not a single mistake in over 40 years. He worked alone. Never took vacation. Never missed a burial. He lived in the back room of the caretaker's office, next to the old supply shed and a tin-roofed greenhouse. He didn't own a car, just an ancient bike with milk crates strapped to the back. When asked what he did in the winters, Edgar once replied, keeping him warm. The locked door. The concrete hatch beneath the fallen tree was 6 feet wide, covered by 3 inches of dirt and a headstone marked Eunice Flannery, 1904 to 1978. But Eunice was never buried in Whispering Pines. Her records showed she'd been cremated and scattered off the coast of Georgia. The headstone had been faked. Beneath it, the concrete hatch had a recessed keyhole, rusted over but intact. When the fire department pried it open, the metal door gave a groan, and a gust of warm, foul-smelling air rolled out. Below was a short stairwell, and a single narrow room. Inside the room, the chamber beneath Section D was dimly lit by a single exposed bulb, still working, powered by a cable that snaked up to the dirt and into the greenhouse. There were no bodies, but the room was far from empty. Along the back wall stood 3 rows of steel filing cabinets, floor to ceiling. A workbench lined with old Polaroid cameras, topographical maps, and a dusty typewriter sat opposite. And in the center of the room, on a wooden pedestal, a ledger, leather-bound, untitled, heavy. Its first page bore only a date, September 3rd, 1982. The ledger entries. Each page in the book followed the same format. A name, a location written as GPS coordinates, a burial depth measurement, and a brief note. Example, H.J. Mathers, 38.2239 degrees north, 78.9342 degrees west, 5.5 feet, no casket, canvas wrap, quiet night. There were over 70 names listed. Many of the names were not in the official cemetery records. Several didn't match any known death certificates in Mason Hollow or the state of Virginia, and when investigators cross-referenced the coordinates, They didn't point to whispering pines. They pointed to forests, riverbanks, abandoned lots, and distant fields, most on private or government land. Barlow had been burying people, in places no one should. The Polaroids, inside the filing cabinets. Investigators found hundreds of labeled Polaroids, most clipped together with paper tags. The photos varied. Some were faces, young, old, male, female. Some showed hands bound with rope or feet beside open holes in the earth. Others were grave markers, homemade crosses, or simply disturbed patches of soil. But none matched graves in the cemetery, and many were time-stamped with dates matching the ledger entries. Dozens were dated between 1982 and 2004. There was no overlap with official burials at Whispering Pines. The quiet man's quiet death. Edgar Barlow had died just 6 months earlier. No funeral. No next of kin. A neighbor found him slumped in his rocking chair inside the caretaker's shed. Television static, still humming in the background. The coroner ruled a heart failure. His modest belongings were boxed and donated. His journal, filled with cryptic gardening notes and weather observations, was never questioned. He was buried, ironically, in a plot he had likely dug himself. But not long before his death, he'd told the town librarian something odd during a rare visit to renew an expired card. They say your last breath is a secret. Mine's been buried for years. Who were they? When the FBI became involved, a pattern emerged. Among the names in the ledger, 2 matched unsolved missing persons cases from the 1980s in nearby counties. One was a traveling salesman last seen in 1990. Another was a local teen, Andrea Lattimore, who disappeared in 1997 after a Halloween party. No one had ever connected them before. Different ages, different backgrounds, different years. The only thing linking them? They were all buried by Edgar, without a trace. The storm that felled a tree unearthed more than rotted roots. It revealed a network of secrets meticulously maintained by a man no one questioned, who spent decades hiding the dead in plain sight. But the most terrifying question still lingered. Why? Was Edgar a vigilante? A serial killer? Or something worse? A man hired to make people disappear? June 2023. Whispering Pine Cemetery, Mason Hollow, Virginia. The town was still reeling from the discovery of the underground room when the investigation into the names in Edgar Barlow's ledger began. There were 73 entries in total. 34 were listed only by initials. 18 had no last names. At least 12 were completely untraceable. But 5 names stood out because they did exist. They were known. They were missed. And no one had ever imagined they were buried within 100 miles of Mason Hollow. 1. Andrea Lattimore, the Halloween Vanish. Disappeared October 31st, 1997. Age 17. Hometown Culpeper, Virginia. Last seen walking home from a Halloween party at 11:22 p.m. Andrea's case had once made state headlines. She left the party alone. No sign of struggle. Her costume, a black cat with faux fur cuffs, was found folded on her bed the next morning. Her purse and keys remained untouched. Police suspected she ran away, but her mother, Sylvia Lattimore, insisted Andrea didn't run. She was scared of the dark. She wouldn't have walked more than a block alone. In Edgar's ledger, her entry read, ill 38.163 3 degrees north, 78.6811 degrees west, 5.2 feet. Wore glitter. Cold night. Didn't scream. When authorities visited the GPS location, they found a sunken patch of earth behind an old, long-abandoned greenhouse off Route 522. Soil tests revealed human remains wrapped in plastic sheeting. DNA confirmed Andrea Lattimore. 2. Joseph M. Henley, the salesman. Disappeared August 15, 1990. Age 52. Hometown Albany, New York. Last seen booking a motel room outside Staunton, Virginia. Joseph was a regional vacuum cleaner rep who crisscrossed the southeast. His wife reported him missing after he missed 3 scheduled calls and failed to return home. His rental car was found 2 towns over. Keys still in the ignition, trunk open, no signs of struggle. He was presumed the victim of a robbery gone wrong. His name appears in Edgar's book as JMH, 38.2927 degrees north, 78.7123 degrees west, 6.0 feet. Spoke kindly, asked about God, rested easy, at the coordinates, deep in the woods behind an old timber mill. Cadaver dogs found a disturbed site. Remains were recovered, along with a rusted money clip bearing the initials JMH. 3. Marlene Fisk, the Jane Doe that wasn't, disappeared November 2nd, 1983. Age 36. Hometown, Fredericksburg, Virginia. Last seen leaving her night shift at a roadside diner. Marlene had fought to rebuild her life after getting out of an abusive marriage. She was living in a trailer just off the interstate and working double shift to support her 2 children. That night, she never came home. A Jane Doe matching her description was found 2 years later in a landfill, but due to the advanced decomposition, the match was never confirmed. Edgar's ledger lists. MF, 38.1755 degrees north, 78.6258 degrees west, 5.4 feet. Brought her own blanket. Wept. Slept. Authorities returned to site. An overgrown ravine behind a burned-out church. Buried beneath 6 feet of soil was a blue fleece blanket wrapped around partial skeletal remains. Dental records matched. Marlene Fisk. 4. Isaac Doolin, the boy in the barn. Disappeared July 4th, 1987. Age 12. Hometown, Madison, Virginia. Last seen walking to his cousin's house with backpack and a bag of fireworks. Isaac was the middle child of 5. He was quiet, bookish, and rarely strayed far from home. On Independence Day, he told his mother he was walking 3 blocks to his cousin's to watch fireworks. He never made it. Neighbors reported seeing him walking alone past the edge of town, near the orchard. In Edgar's ledger, ID 38.2218 degrees north, 78.7157 degrees west for 0.5 feet. Hummed to him, kept asking if it was a game. Authorities located the coordinates behind an old horse barn once owned by the Fraslin family, now abandoned and falling apart. Using ground-penetrating radar, they located a small body beneath what was once a feed trough. The remains matched Isaac Doolin. 5. Terrell Bain, the drifter who wasn't, disappeared March 3rd, 1986. Age unknown, approximate mid-30s. Hometown unknown. Last seen hitchhiking near Gordonsville, Virginia. Terrell was known only by first name at the local shelter. He came and went quietly, rarely spoke of his past. Most assumed he was mentally ill. One morning, he disappeared from his usual park bench. No one looked too hard. In Edgar's ledger, TB 38.2002 degrees north, 78.7089 degrees west, 5.0 feet. Didn't mind. Call me a friend. At the site, beneath the roots of a sycamore tree, were bones, a Bible, and a pair of broken glasses. There was no way to positively ID him. No fingerprints, no dental matches. But the initials and the description match. One of the invisible people, no longer invisible. 5 people, 5 burials, 1 gravekeeper. All 5 matched the same pattern. Buried alone in rural, off-grid locations. No official record of burial. No connection to each other. All had vanished without strong leads or witnesses. And all were recorded by Edgar in exacting detail. He remembered the weather, the sound they made, the way they looked in the dirt. Some entries were even tender, like someone caring for the dead rather than killing them, which raised the question. Was he their killer or their final witness? The FBI's dilemma. As agents combed through the rest of the ledger, 2 competing theories began to form. Theory 1. Edgar was a serial killer who operated quietly under the cover of his position, targeting the vulnerable and discarded. Theory 2. Edgar was a cleaner, someone who disposed of body for others. A participant, but not always a murderer. Some entries were too cold, too clinical. Others were strangely emotional. He sometimes described what they were wearing or what they said, but he never described how they died. Who helped him? The most chilling implication came from the logistical analysis of the 73 burials. At least 21 required transport of a body across county lines. Several occurred on the same night, impossible for one man on a bike. Some graves were dug in under an hour, which would require equipment Edgar didn't have access to. And some were dug years before Edgar had officially taken a caretaker job, meaning he wasn't working alone. He might never have been. The more names they uncovered, the more it became clear Whispering Pine Cemetery was only one piece of the puzzle. The real graveyard was scattered across backwoods, under trailers, behind barns, and beneath forgotten trees. And Edgar Barlow had mapped it all. But one journal entry in particular, dated 1991 and circled in red ink, simply read, "They'll come for her. Don't let them." Who was her? And what did Edgar mean? FBI Field Office, Charlottesville, Virginia, July 2023. By now, agents had cross-referenced over 24 names from Edgar Barlow's ledger. Most ended in graves, some in mystery. But on page 46 of the ledger, under an otherwise routine set of entries, they found one that didn't follow Edgar's typical format. Instead of coordinates, the location was replaced by a single phrase, "not buried," and next to the initials. CJH, July 12, 1991, 10:45 p.m. Too young. Couldn't do it. Hid her. Circled in red ink with a note beneath. "They'll come for her. Don't let them." It was the first sign that one of Edgar's would-be burials might have survived, and that Edgar had gone off script. Finding CJH. The initials CJH led the team into records from the summer of 1991. The closest match? A child named Clara Jo Hemsworth, reported missing from Warrenton, Virginia, just 40 miles northeast of Mason Hollow. She'd vanished from her bedroom during the night. Her mother, Linda Hemsworth, told police she had tucked Clara in around 9 p.m. At 6:30 a.m., Clara was gone. No broken windows. No signs of forced entry. Police initially suspected a runaway. Later, a family member. But no evidence was ever found. She was 6 years old. The case that went cold. Clara's case had faded into obscurity. Another tragic entry in a long list of unsolved disappearances from the early 90s. No ransom demands. No sightings. Then in 2004, the case resurfaced when DNA from a shirt found in a truck stop bathroom in North Carolina matched Clara's. But again, the trail went cold. No one realized Edgar Barlow had left a breadcrumb in his private ledger. And no one had ever looked for Clara in Mason Hollow. Until now, a hidden letter, tucked inside one of Edgar's filing cabinets, hidden behind a false drawer base. Agents discovered a sealed envelope. On the outside, in case they find her, inside was a 2-page handwritten letter. "To the person who comes after me, I didn't bury her. I couldn't. She looked up at me and asked if she'd ever see her mom again. I took her to the well house and locked it from the inside. Left her food, toys, kept her warm. I thought they'd come back. But they didn't. I lied to them. Told them I lost her. They got mad. I think they killed someone else instead. She wasn't like the others. She didn't cry. She forgave me. I tried to keep her safe. I hope she got away." The well house, a structure never mentioned in town records. It wasn't part of the cemetery, and it wasn't on any maps. But there were blueprints in the envelope. A small stone building on the south edge of the woods, just beyond the cemetery's maintenance fence. The well house, overgrown and half swallowed by kudzu vines. The stone structure was nearly invisible. Investigators found it in the early morning hours. Mosquitoes thick in the humid air, boots crunching through pine needles and brush. The door was padlocked, but the hinges had long since rusted. They forced it open with a pry bar. Inside, silence. Dust coated everything. Mold clung to old wood. In the center of the room was an iron trapdoor, half concealed beneath a warped rug. The hinges creaked open, and below it, a ladder descending into a hand-dug cellar. The underground room. At first, they thought it was a storm shelter. Then they saw the walls. Crayon drawings covered the lower stone blocks. Stars, houses, stick figures holding hands. A name was written again and again in a child's handwriting. Clara Jo. A rustic cot lay against one wall. Nearby, a plastic doll with one missing eye. There was a bookshelf with faded children's books, juice boxes long expired, and a collection of cassette tapes labeled with dates. In the corner sat a tape recorder. They pressed play. A child's voice filled the room. Day 5. Edgar brought me the red juice again. He said the others are still mad, so I have to stay quiet. I miss Mama. I hope she finds me. Where did she go? DNA tests confirmed that the underground room had once been occupied by Clara Jo Hemsworth, but there was no sign of her body. No blood. No remains. Nothing to indicate she died in that space. The last dated cassette was from August 3rd, 1991. Edgar said he's going to be gone for a few days. He said if I hear anyone knocking, I have to be quiet. But I heard footsteps last night. Not Edgar's. I didn't say anything. I think they went away. That was the final recording. The next page in Edgar's ledger is blank. The next entry is dated 4 months later. Clara Jo was never mentioned again. A break in the case. 3 days after the well house was found, a call came into the FBI tip line. A woman named Joanna Clymer, a 38-year-old librarian in upstate New York, claimed she had once gone by another name. She said she had nightmares all her life about being trapped underground, of a man named Edgar, of whispering voices above her head. She had no birth certificate before 1993, no adoption records. She was taken in by a rural couple in Pennsylvania who found her wandering in the woods near their farm at age 6. The authorities had chalked it up to abandonment, but Joanna remembered something. He sang when he was scared, old church hymns, and he smelled like soil, like dirt. She remembered the name Clara Jo, and when shown a photo of Edgar Barlow from 1992, she burst into tears. The DNA match, a sample was collected, run against the Hemsworth family DNA still on file. A 99.996% match. Joanna Clymer was Clara Jo Hemsworth, alive. The interview, in a recorded conversation with agents, Clara, now a woman, described how Edgar treated her. He didn't hurt me. He scared me, yes, but he wasn't like the others. I never saw their faces, just heard them sometimes. Man, angry. One of them said I wasn't the right one. She remembers being moved from place to place, being kept in the cellar, given puzzles, books, and dolls. And she remembers the day Edgar left. He said, I did the wrong thing for the right reason, and now I'm going to fix it. He left a backpack by the door with food and said, wait 3 days, then run. She waited, then ran into the woods. She doesn't remember how she crossed state lines, but she made it. What was Edgar protecting her from? If Edgar had been disposing of victims for someone else, or some kind of organized group, then Clara's survival posed a risk. Her age, her innocence perhaps had made him hesitate. Or perhaps he saw something in her that reminded him of a past mistake. But the implication from the ledger, that someone else had tried to take her, and that Edgar had stopped him, opened a new theory. That Edgar wasn't just a killer. He was a gatekeeper for something much larger. Clara Jo Hemsworth is now living under federal protection. She's begun trauma therapy and plans to speak publicly once she's ready. Her story confirms one truth. Not all of Edgar's secrets are buried in the dirt. Some are alive, some remember, and if Clara survived, maybe others did too. Agents uncover evidence that Edgar was taking instructions, not just from instinct, but from somewhere higher up, because deep in his storage chest, they find a list of payments, and each dollar matched a name. FBI evidence storage, Mason Hollow Police Department, July 2023. By now, federal agents had uncovered more than a hidden burial room, a false grave, and an off-the-book cellar. They confirmed the identity of Clara Jo Hemsworth, one of Edgar Barlow's nearly victims. The prevailing theory was shifting. Maybe Edgar wasn't a lone killer at all. Maybe he was a contractor. And with the discovery of a payment ledger locked in an old chest beneath the floorboards of the caretaker's shed, that theory gained terrifying weight, because the amounts listed weren't just random. They matched names in the burial book. The Ledger of Lies. The payment ledger was tucked inside an oilskin pouch marked simply with a hand-scrawled date. Begin May 2nd, 1980. The interior pages, like Edgar's burial log, were tidy, methodical, clinical. Each entry followed the same structure: a date, a coded transaction ID, e.g. 019A, 019B, etc., a dollar amount, a single set of initials, and a brief location name. Example: June 15, 1983, 027B, for $1,200 JMH, Timberline. The same initials, JMH, also appear in the burial ledger on the same week. Joseph M. Henley, the salesman. The entry, Timberline, was a match to the wooded burial site behind the old sawmill. The same pattern repeated. Again, and again, and again, the payments matched the dead. A forensic accountant working with the FBI matched 31 entries between the payment ledger and Edgar's burial book, each matched by date, initials, and a rough location code. The payment amounts range from $1,200 to $7,500. No transaction had any bank data, just numbers. All cash. It was a murder-for-hire log. Only Edgar hadn't written who was paying, but he'd written how much they paid. And that was enough to start uncovering more. The envelope of receipts. Stuffed between the back pages of the ledger was a yellowing envelope labeled "Receipts Never Cashed." Inside, dozens of torn stubs from Western Union, MoneyGram, and postal orders, each bearing similar IDs to those in the ledger. One was addressed to a fake name, Alton Fisk, care of a P.O. box in Mineral, Virginia. Another to Greg Latham, General Delivery. None of the names had tax records, licenses, or voting registrations. All aliases. Someone had taken steps to fund Edgar Barlow's work without being traceable. But the paper trail still had one fingerprint, the name that shouldn't have been there. On the back of one crumpled envelope was a faded signature. It had smudged badly, likely exposed to dampness over years. But under spectral light, agents recovered the writing, G. Gratch. It meant nothing at first, until they ran it through a federal clearance database. Gerald Gratch was a former D.C. Corrections officer who worked as a rehabilitation contractor from 1976 to 1985. He was never indicted, but had long been suspected of running extrajudicial operations with ex-cons and career criminals, quietly getting rid of recidivists deemed too difficult for the courts. Essentially, a state-sanctioned cleaner. Gratch was believed to have disappeared in the early 2000s. Some said he retired to Florida. Others claimed he died overseas. But now his name was connected to payments made to Edgar, and the dates lined up. The list of favors. Buried inside the payment book was a folded piece of paper, crudely typed, across the top. Favors owed, 1987 revision. There were 12 names on the list, each typed in code, using initials and nicknames like Cabby paid 1, Donkey lost 2, owed 1, Gospel holding 3. These weren't names meant for police. These were operational aliases, a code used between people who buried bodies for a living. Edgar had circled 4 names in red ink. One of them was Bellman defaulted, broke terms. Next to it, scrawled in the margin, he didn't dig it. I did. He never came back. A burial he regretted. One entry in Edgar's burial book stood out now more than ever. It wasn't detailed. No initials. No coordinates. Just a date. January 11th, 1995. And a phrase. I shouldn't have taken the job. Investigators returned to the filing cabinets. In the last drawer was a folder marked Bell, a partial match to Bellman. Inside, one Polaroid, a grainy black and white photo of a wooden door, slightly ajar. Behind it, what looked like a basement staircase. On the back, written in pencil, House on Roanoke Hill. Never forget her scream. The house on Roanoke Hill. Record showed a single foreclosure on Roanoke Hill Drive, just outside Mason Hollow. In December 1994, the house was abandoned, boarded up by 1996. The previous owner, Marvin Cottrell, a man convicted of unlawful imprisonment in 1989 and released in late 1993. His record matched the alias Bellman from FBI files. He disappeared in 1995. The same month Edgar had written his regret. When the property was searched, agents uncovered a false wall in the basement. Behind it, a dirt chamber lined with lime. No body, but traces of flesh and bone fragments. Along with 4 cigarette butts, DNA matched the Cottrell. He had been killed and buried, likely by Edgar, the cleaner's conscience. It was becoming clear. Edgar Barlow had taken money to dispose of the unwanted, the dangerous, the vulnerable. Some were killers. Some were victims. Sometimes he chose not to finish the job, like with Clara Jo Hemsworth. Sometimes he left notes of guilt, burials he didn't agree with, people he couldn't forget. And with Bellman, he'd killed the client himself, maybe out of retribution, maybe because the line had been crossed. A network of shadows. The more they uncovered, the more disturbing the implication became. Edgar wasn't the only one burying bodies. He was one node in a larger network, stretching back to the late 70s. A system of extrajudicial handlers, cleaners, and killers operating with silent funding and deliberate plausible deniability. The law had its holes, and men like Edgar filled them, with shovels. The quiet man who kept graves so clean may not have dug them all out of malice. He was hired, and at some point, he began choosing who deserved the dirt. July 2023, FBI Digital Forensics Lab, Richmond, Virginia. By now, the world knew Edgar Barlow was far more than a humble gravekeeper. He'd buried people across 4 decades, some criminals, some innocents, often for money, sometimes by choice, and occasionally against his own conscience. But no one had heard his voice. Not until the FBI's forensics team restored a collection of cassettes found in a sealed ammunition crate in his basement. Each numbered and labeled only with dates. Most of the tapes were journal entries, but one stood out. A 90-minute cassette labeled simply, "Let Him Talk." Dated March 29, 1993. What agents heard next would change the direction of the case. Because Edgar wasn't the only one on the tape. Tape log, March 29, 1993. The recording starts with static, then footsteps. Someone sets the recorder down. The first voice is clearly Edgar's, gravelly, slow, and deliberate. Edgar, clock says 11:20. You said you got 15 minutes. So talk. Then a second voice enters. Distinct, smooth, educated. Unidentified male voice, later designated subject M1. His tone? Cold, calculating. A man used to being obeyed. M1. This isn't about you anymore, Edgar. It's about scale. There are more coming. And we need you clean, steady, and obedient. No more charity cases. No more digging for guilt. Edgar interrupts. Edgar. She was a child. You sent me a child. M1. She was a risk. You know what that means. Her family wasn't cooperating. She overheard the wrong thing. Edgar. She asked me if I was her uncle. A pause. Then M1 chuckles softly. M1. Did you say yes? The line is where I draw it. Halfway through the tape, the argument escalates. Edgar accuses M1 of changing the rules, of no longer targeting the irredeemable, criminals, fugitives, violent offenders, but now eliminating inconveniences, whistleblowers, political threats, children. Edgar, you brought me into this to take care of monsters. Now you're sending me birthdays. M1. The machine doesn't care, Edgar, only that it keeps moving. Do you want your ledger clean, or do you want to be in someone else's? The implication is chilling. Edgar's compliance was secured by mutual guilt. He was paid, but also compromised. Blackmail, leverage, fear. M1 says a name near the end of the tape. M1. You remember Roanoke Hill? You want that little accident aired out. Roanoke Hill, the Cottrell case. The man Edgar buried without orders. A personal kill. He was being watched. Let him talk. The final 15 minutes of the tape are mostly Edgar, speaking as if confessing. He talked about digging the same grave twice, burying empty boxes to keep a quota, and choosing not to finish some jobs. Then, chillingly, Edgar Some of them weren't dead yet. That was the part that kept me up. When I put them in, some coughed, some begged. But the ones that were silent, those were the worst. He describes Bellman, one of the code names from the favors owed list. Edgar. Bellman didn't pay me to bury. He paid me to shut up. He'd already done the burying. I just covered it deeper. At the very end, he whispers, "Edgar, she's still alive. The girl, I saw her running. Let her run." Then, click, tape ends. Voice analysis. FBI analysts attempted voice matching M. One to known federal, state, and military personnel active in black operations during the late 1980s and early 1990s. 3 potential matches were narrowed down. Elias Monroe, former NSA field agent with ties to classified detainment programs, died 2001 in a reported boating accident. Dr. Warren Tao, ex-CIA logistics operator, rumored to have gone dark after Iran-Contra fallout. Whereabouts unknown. General Patrick Vexler, a now-retired military intelligence commander, never charged but quietly investigated for illegal interrogation programs. All 3 men had operated within 300 miles of Mason Hollow during the time of the recordings, but none could be definitively linked yet. The question of consent, with the tape now authenticated and submitted to court proceedings. The FBI faced a dilemma. If Edgar was obeying orders from a larger network, does that absolve him or damn him deeper? He'd admitted to burying people alive, to accepting payment, to lying to families, to disposing of evidence. But the tone of the tape suggested regret, resistance, even fear. Was Edgar Barlow a monster who dug for money, a pawn in a government-sanctioned disposal ring, or a man trying to do good inside a structure built on evil? The other tapes, in total, the FBI recovered 48 cassettes from Edgar's hidden crate. So far, only 11 have been decrypted and transcribed. Among them, a tape labeled a yell, "Don't forget the glitter," likely about Andrea Lattimore. A recording titled, "He Sang While He Died." A file marked only payment interrupted. Many feature more than one voice. Some feature screams. And one, ominously labeled August 1998, no name, includes a line, "They paid extra to keep this one off paper." Whatever Edgar was doing, someone was willing to spend a lot to keep it secret. The public reaction. When snippets of the recordings were leaked to the press, public trust in law enforcement agencies collapsed overnight. Podcasts dissected every breath. Online sleuths tried decoding the voices. Families of long-missing loved ones demanded access. A new theory spread like wildfire, that hundreds of people, maybe more, have been disappeared not by criminals, but by systems designed to hide what could not be tried in court. And Edgar? He was now seen not just as a killer, but as a vault of answers. Edgar Barlow is dead, but his tapes speak. And among the recordings, agents now search for the truth behind case file 077, an entry in the burial book with no initials, no date, and no notes. Just a red X. The FBI hunts for the one grave Edgar marked as too dangerous to record, the one he refused to speak about, even on tape. And what they find may reveal the first body Edgar ever buried, and why he never stopped. FBI Command Center, Mason Hollow, Virginia, August 2023. In the growing web of evidence, bones, journals, hidden tapes, one mystery stood out above all. A single, unnumbered entry in Edgar Barlow's burial ledger. No initials, no date, no coordinates, no notes, only a crude, blood-red X across the page. It wasn't like Edgar. He was obsessively neat, meticulous in documenting names, locations, even moods. But here, nothing, and that terrified the investigators more than any grave they dug. The forensic clue. Dr. Lila Hensley, the lead forensic linguist assigned to decoding Edgar's documents, discovered something in the margins under ultraviolet light. Faint ink revealed the phrase, "Don't dig twice." It wasn't visible to the naked eye, clearly an erased note, but was written in Edgar's own hand. And just beneath it, scrawled in almost illegible pencil, it started there. Suddenly, agents realized this wasn't just a grave. It might be the first, the beginning of Edgar's descent. Interview with a survivor. Agents brought in Russell McHale, a former groundskeeper who briefly worked under Edgar at Whispering Pines in 1979. McHale, now in his 70s, had fled town decades ago after being fired under unclear circumstances, according to cemetery records. His hands shook as he flipped through a scan of the ledger. When he saw the red X, he paused. Mick Hale, that's the hill. Agent, what hill? Mick Hale, far north corner, beyond the marker stones. We called it the Ridge. Never landscaped it. Too rocky, too damn quiet. Agent, what happened there? McHale didn't speak for a full minute. Then, Mick Hale, I heard something come out of the dirt once. In 79. Sounded like crying. I asked Edgar about it. He said, it's not crying if you don't believe in it. I quit the next day. The Ridge, the area known as the Ridge, was outside the formal cemetery boundaries. Untouched. No graves. No headstones. It had been left wild, almost intentionally. Ground-penetrating radar showed anomalous soil shifts beneath a patch of land beneath a dying willow tree, measuring approximately 8 feet long, 3 feet wide. Exactly the size of a coffin. The team arrived just after dawn. What they found below would make national headlines. The coffin, 6 feet down, they hit wood, but it wasn't a standard burial casket. It was handmade, rough-hewn timber nailed together unevenly, painted black, and wrapped in barbed wire. There were claw marks on the inside of the lid, and what was inside had no name. The body. The skeleton was wrapped in stained canvas. The skull showed trauma, blunt force fractures to the right side, a jawbone shattered. The femur had been broken and healed at a twisted angle, suggesting long-term abuse before death. Dental records, DNA, and missing persons reports were run against a national database. Nothing matched, but what chilled the team most was this. The corpse had been buried with a notebook clutched to its chest. Inside, pages written in Edgar's hand, a confessional, the journal of the Red X. The entries were sparse, disconnected, emotional. First page, 1976. She knew. I didn't mean to. She was only going to tell the sheriff. I begged her, but she ran. Another page. She said I was broken. Maybe I was, but I still held her hand after. And later, I buried her with the hymnal she liked, the one about mercy. But mercy didn't help me. Final entry. This was my first. Before money, before orders, before the favors. If anyone finds this, I didn't start as a killer. I started as a coward. Who was she? Despite extensive investigation, the identity of the victim remains unknown. However, a single scrap of photograph was found in the folds of the canvas wrapping the corpse. It showed a teenage girl sitting on a porch, blurry, sun-washed, but smiling. Behind her, a faded farmhouse with a painted sign above the door that read, Briar Cottage, Mercy Lives Here. A team tracked the building to an abandoned property in Nelson County, Virginia, long since condemned. Town records showed the house was once owned by a woman named Mary Bell Klein, a schoolteacher who vanished in 1976. She was never reported missing, but in a box of school files in the Nelson County archives, her signature appears on one student referral. The student's name, Edgar Barlow. The first burial. It was her, Edgar's first kill. His teacher, his mentor, his moral compass. She had seen something, threatened to tell, maybe about his early violence, his obsession with the dead, or something he confessed to, and rather than face justice, Edgar silenced her, then buried her under the willow tree, and marked it with a red X, not as a warning, but a grave of shame. Now investigators understood the root of Edgar's darkness. The system may have corrupted him, but the seed was already there. He killed before he was paid. He buried before he was told. And the first time, he covered her in mercy. But even monsters remember their first victim. Agents unlock a hidden folder behind Edgar's fireplace and discover a kill list never recorded in any ledger. A list of people still alive and marked for death. August 2023, Mason Hollow, Virginia. It was in Edgar Barlow's fireplace, not beneath it, but behind it, where investigators found a second safe, a hidden compartment sealed behind false bricks, revealed by accident when a falling poker struck the hearth at just the right angle. A thud, a hollow echo. Inside the narrow cavity was a metal lockbox no larger than a lunch pail. Inside that, wrapped in oilcloth, was a single folder labeled in hand-stamped ink. Burn list. No entries in the burial ledger matched its contents. No tape mentioned the names. And yet, every person on this list was marked with chilling precision. Not the dead. Not yet. These were the targets. And some of them were still alive. The burn list. Contents. The folder contained a sheet of yellowed, typewritten paper titled Operation Mercy, Revision 5.3. Underneath, 15 names, each accompanied by a 4-digit number, presumed code or case file, a last known address, a brief note under status, active, deferred, or cleared. The final column, disposition, marked either burial approved, hold, or redacted by hand. But 4 names were underlined in red pen. Those 4 entries had handwritten notes by Edgar himself. One note stood out. Tried once. Got away. Might talk. This was no post-mortem record. It was a kill list. The survivors. Federal agents immediately prioritized the 4 red line names. Each was cross-referenced in public and sealed records. Shockingly, 2 of them were alive. One, Dr. Madeline Ortiz, status, deferred, a 67-year-old retired medical examiner living in rural Kentucky. In 1989, she worked briefly as a private pathology consultant in Northern Virginia. That same year, her home was mysteriously firebombed. Case unsolved. Dr. Ortiz had changed her name and identity in 1991. When interviewed, she confirmed, "I saw what they brought me. That wasn't routine death. And when I asked questions, someone followed me for a week." She remembered a man with dirty fingernails and gravedigger's boots standing at the end of her street. It was Edgar. She moved that same night. 2, Glenna Tusk. Status, active, a former housekeeper at the Whispering Pines Cemetery Lodge. Glenna had disappeared in 1995 after reporting strange sounds from the shed and being hospitalized for paranoia. The FBI found her living off-grid in a Montana cabin, armed and reclusive. When shown Edgar's photo, she didn't hesitate. He told me I wasn't supposed to hear it. The girl screaming. But I did, and he told me, "Now I gotta bury you or you gotta disappear." I chose to disappear. She wept when agents confirmed Edgar was dead. You don't know what it's like, living years thinking you're still on someone's list. Now she knew. And she was right. The burned entries. Among the 15 names, 7 were charred, burned partially, as if someone had tried to destroy the document and change their mind. One name was only partially legible, R. Ken. Another was obscured entirely, except for a typed note. Cleared. Compensation paid. No burial required. Was this person bought off? Or did they agree to something in exchange for their life? Either way, the list wasn't just about erasure. It was about control. Who gets silenced, who gets scared, and who gets spared. The note inside, tucked between the burned pages, was a handwritten letter. Not typed, not formal, scrawled in haste. The ink smeared in places, as if written during panic. I didn't want to keep this list. They made me, said it was insurance. If I didn't carry it, they'd know I couldn't finish. I buried the ones they said, but not all. Some I let walk. Some I let run. I'm tired of being in the line. And at the bottom, if you found this, dig the box behind the church wall, the one with no name. The church wall. Back at Mason Hollow Cemetery stood the old stone chapel, long condemned and overrun with ivy. Behind it, a crumbling stone retaining wall partially collapsed by erosion. Agents began excavation just after sunset. 3 feet down, wrapped in waterproof tarp, was a military-style footlocker. Inside, 6 cassette tapes, a black binder labeled failsafe, a single Polaroid of a man in a priest's collar, his face burned out of the photo. The binder was the true prize. Operation Mercy, The blueprint. The binder detailed Operation Mercy, referenced earlier in the burn list. It wasn't a law enforcement operation. It was a containment protocol. A network of gravediggers, handlers, and correctors used to clean up soft failures in federal, medical, and corporate sectors. In essence, if someone became a liability, they were cleared. If they resisted, deferred. If they posed a threat, burial approved. The program had ties to private military contractors, former correctional officers, and yes, religious institutions offering penance services for deeply confidential sins. Edgar Barlow was one of their longest-serving field assets, and he was the only one who ever tried to get out. The Polaroid priest. The photo, damaged though it was, held one legible clue, a name embossed on the reverse side. Father Marcus Deering, 1984, Chapel of St. Withrow. Deering had once run a rural rehab facility for troubled men in West Virginia, closed abruptly after allegations of disappearances. He was never charged. Now, his name was on a document inside a death list vault. A trace run by the FBI revealed Deering was still alive, living in South Carolina under a new name. A visit was arranged, and what Deering confessed to would rip open an entirely new chapter of horror. The burn list wasn't the end. It was a deferred execution queue, a registry of people meant to die quietly, people who knew things too dangerous to speak aloud. And Edgar, in the end, was the one man who kept those deaths from happening. He didn't just bury secrets. He sometimes saved them. The FBI confronts Father Marcus Deering, and he tells him about the first 7, the original candidates chosen for Operation Mercy, and how only one of them survived. August 2023, Charleston, South Carolina. FBI field interview room. Father Marcus Deering hadn't worn a collar in 20 years. When the FBI found him, he was living under the name Elliot Tram, working as a night clerk at a rundown marina motel. Quiet, obscure, off-grid. He didn't resist when agents arrived. Didn't even ask for a lawyer. He just looked up at them and said, "I've been waiting for someone to ask about the 7, the original 7. Inside the interview room, Deering's voice trembled not from fear, but from age and the burden of memory. He confirmed he was formally assigned to the Chapel of St. Withrow, an isolated faith and rehabilitation center for men in rural West Virginia. The chapel operated from 1979 to 1985, funded by private donors and mysterious grants. It wasn't a real chapel, not in the way people think. It was a holding ground, a triage point. We didn't save souls. We sorted them." Deering went on to explain that the chapel was one of 3 such locations along the East Coast, known in internal memos as processing sites. And in the summer of 1980, 7 men were brought there as part of a pilot program under Operation Mercy. The goal? Test the limits of compliance, see who could be reformed and who needed to disappear. The profiles. The 7 men brought to St. Withrow weren't average criminals. According to Deering, each had a file marked HNS, high need suppression. These were men who had witnessed or participated in illegal government or military actions, were considered unstable but too dangerous to be tried in open court, had, in at least 2 cases, committed uncharged multiple homicides. The idea was this: give them religion, give them isolation, give them the option to vanish or be cleared. Only one succeeded in leaving. The others, they went into the ground. Edgar's role. According to Deering, Edgar Barlow was not just a gravedigger. He was a final evaluator. They'd send Edgar in the last week. He'd sit with them, watch them, read their files. He always carried a little red folder. If he shut it before the week ended, we knew that one wouldn't be going home. When asked how many of the original 7 Edgar had buried, Deering's voice faltered. All but one, number 6, the one who escaped the system, the one Edgar let walk. That man's name? Jacob Elroy Tiernan, a former Army field medic dishonorably discharged in 1976 for suspected war crimes in Cambodia. Tiernan vanished from all official records in 1981. Until now, the survivor, Jacob Tiernan, the one man from the original 7 who wasn't buried, was last seen in Maryland in 1986. Then he vanished again. But after decades of silence, a new tip came from an unlikely source. A nurse in rural Tennessee had treated an elderly man with strange injuries, shrapnel scars, missing fingers, and burns consistent with chemical exposure. When shown a photo of Tiernan from 1980, she nodded immediately. That's John. John T. He comes through every fall. Lives in the woods. Real quiet. Real polite. But he never stays long. The FBI traced Tiernan to a patch of woodland near Norris Lake. They found his cabin abandoned, but inside was a journal, and what it contained rewrote the entire foundation of the Edgar Barlow case. The Journal of Tiernan. The leather-bound book was filled with chaotic handwriting, but legible. Among the most shocking entries, they told us we were getting rehab, but it was a filter. See who had no family, who wouldn't be missed. One night, I woke up and one of the others was gone. They said he ran, but I heard the dirt being moved outside the chapel. Barlow came last. He watched me. I pretended to break, told him I'd confess anything, that I saw God, that I was cured. He stared at me for an hour. Then he said, "You're the only one who doesn't lie when he's scared." He left me food, a map, and said, "Go, don't die in a box." He saved me, but I think he hated himself for it. The final confession. Back in Charleston, Deering sat for a final tape confession. He revealed that Operation Mercy continued through the mid-90s, even after the collapse of St. Withrow. Barlow was used in over 40 evaluations at different chapels, work farms, and hospice placements, each a thin veil for human disposal operations. I stopped believing in God the moment I realized I was signing off on graves. Edgar stopped believing in justice the first time he buried someone who forgave him. And in a final chilling statement, there were more than 7. There were always more. The map. Inside Tiernan's cabin was a hidden compartment beneath a loose floorboard. Inside it, a map drawn by hand. It showed red excess across 3 states, Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, 12 in total. Beside each, in messy block letters, whisper, a code, or names. When matched to federal cold case files, each X corresponded with a missing person last seen in proximity to privately funded correctional or religious facilities. Most were never investigated. The implication? Barlow wasn't burying individuals. He was cleaning entire locations. With Deering's confession and Tiernan's journal, the final pieces are falling into place. Barlow was not just a killer. He was a witness, a cleaner, a man who chose silence, then chose penance. But with the names on the map still missing and one more tape labeled "End of Line" yet to be decoded, questions remain. Agents trace the red excess across 3 states and uncover a mass grave that could contain more than 30 bodies, all buried before the public ever heard the name Edgar Barlow. September 2023. FBI Mobile Command Unit, Appalachia Corridor. The map found beneath Jacob Tiernan's cabin floorboards, hand-drawn, marked with 12 red excess, was more than just a relic of survival. It was a death ledger, a record of locations where Edgar Barlow had been sent not to dig one grave, but to erase entire facilities. Each X carried one word beside it. Whisper, initially dismissed as a code or alias, the FBI's behavioral threat analysis team discovered a chilling reality. Whisper wasn't a name. It was a program classification, a clearance level, used internally by private contractors, certain law enforcement task forces, and black budget government entities. Whisper designated facilities that were too dangerous to be investigated, but too unstable to remain open. The official term? Non-accountable threat detainment and rehabilitation sites. Unofficially, ghost prisons, the Whisper sites. Using Tiernan's map and coordinating with public utility records, historical aerial surveys, and FEMA documentation, agents identified all 12 locations. Most have been shut down decades ago. Some burned, some razed, one buried beneath a highway expansion project. But one site, marked with a double X, was still intact. An abandoned juvenile correctional center in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, near the coal town of Sable Ridge. Local records listed it as closed in 1983, following budget violations and staffing misconduct. But witnesses said it was never truly empty. Locals avoided it. Some called it the Hollow School, the Sable Ridge site. The Hollow School was surrounded by a 10-foot chain-link fence, overgrown, windows shattered, the interior rotted by mold and dust. But behind the building, camouflaged by years of kudzu and underbrush, agents discovered a concrete hatch embedded into the hillside. Laser imaging showed a cavern system, unnatural in shape and depth. And then they found it, the elevator shaft, leading down into a sub-basement that wasn't listed on any floor plan. Edgar's fingerprints were on the interior railing, preserved in mineralized dust. The Chamber of Names. Inside the lowest chamber, agents found a brick room sealed with rusted iron doors. Torchlight revealed the interior. Wooden crates stacked 3 high, each marked with red stenciling. Subject archive, whisper level only. Inside the crates, bones, clothing, ID badges, patient files, photographs of detainees, some as young as 11. Most were classified as unstable youth offenders, though no court records confirmed their incarceration. Some files were stamped with red X and the words, deemed non-compliant, finalization approved. These were kill orders, sanctioned, filed, forgotten, until now. The unrecorded mass grave, adjacent to the basement vault. GPR detected a tunnel collapse beneath the north wing. Excavation revealed a pit, 14 feet wide, 6 feet deep. Inside, 38 sets of remains, stacked, no coffins, no burial rites, each wrapped in plastic or canvas, some with ball gags, others with restraints still attached. Dental records and DNA identified 4 missing juveniles from Pennsylvania and West Virginia, ages 13 to 17. All had been reported missing between 1979 and 1982. All were previously dismissed as runaways. The site was quietly sealed by authorities in 1983. No arrests were ever made. Until now, the Whisper Directive. In the fail-safe binder recovered behind the church wall, agents found a declassified document titled Operational Whisper Directive, Initiation Protocol, 1978 to 81. It outlined the use of non-public facilities for detention and re-evaluation of individuals flagged as threat level 3 or higher. The criteria? Repeated juvenile offenses, undocumented behavioral instability, witness to confidential trauma or internal misconduct, lack of family oversight. In short, kids no one would miss. Page 7 named 3 authorized corrective personnel. The first 2 names were redacted. The third, E. Barlow, a witness emerges. Among the files recovered from the Whisper archive was a preserved voice cassette labeled Subject 6, Recollection Session, October 14, 1981. The voice on the tape belonged to a young male, tense, defensive, rambling, but coherent. His name, Derek Lane, 15 years old at the time. He describes watching other detainees be led downstairs and never come back. He names Mr. Barlow as someone who told him to sleep when you hear screaming. And then, with a whisper's own, he gave me the map, told me to fake a seizure, said if I made it out, I'd have to remember. I remember. Where's Derek Lane? Derek's name never appeared in any state records, but the FBI traced a matching alias, Dean L., used in a series of psychiatric treatment centers in the 1990s. Eventually, they found him. He had been living under an assumed identity in Oregon since 2002, working as a janitor at a church school. When agents approached him, he asked only one question: is he dead? When they answered yes, he said, then I can finally stop watching my window. He confirmed that Edgar helped him escape, and that he saw him bury at least 10 bodies with his own eyes. But what he said next shook the agents. Barlow told me Whisper wasn't just a program. It was a test, to see if we'd turn into what they feared. If we survived, we'd been remade. He said we weren't victims. We were practice. With the mass grave uncovered, the remains cataloged and survivors found, Edgar Barlow's story reached a terrifying new scale. He wasn't just a man haunted by what he did. He was a final functionary in a system designed to erase people before they ever became a problem. And somewhere in the final tape, labeled End of Line, was a voice recording Edgar made before his death. A last message, a final accounting. The FBI listens to Edgar's final tape. In it, he names names, he names places, and he names the one person still alive, who taught him how to bury,